Beneath an empty field can lie the blueprint for an entire civilization. The story of how ancient megacities grew is not a simple tale of sudden creation, but a complex puzzle of layered growth. This video will reconstruct the multiphase expansion of early large-scale urban centers. By the end, you will gain the tools to see any ancient ruin not as a static collection of stones, but as a living, breathing entity with a biography. How do we separate a city's humble beginnings from its age of imperial glory when all we find is one tangled ruin? What hidden pressures force a planned grid to give way to chaotic, vibrant neighborhoods? We will trace how sacred springs transformed into sprawling capitals and how grand designs were reshaped by everyday life. What do you believe is the most enduring legacy a city can leave behind? The distinction is crucial, a matter of scale versus essence. A large village houses a community, but an early large-scale urban center births a new kind of society altogether. To qualify for this title, a settlement must show clear signs of a fundamental transformation in how humans live together. It is not just about more people living in one place. It is about those people taking on specialized roles, creating a social hierarchy, and pooling their efforts to reshape the very landscape around them. We look for the fingerprints of this transformation in the ground. First, evidence of social stratification, meaning clear differences in wealth and status. This might appear as modest homes clustered around a single, vastly larger residence, or as burials where some individuals were laid to rest with great ceremony and gifts while others were not. Second, we find proof of economic specialization. This goes beyond a farmer trading with a potter. It means discovering distinct city quarters dedicated entirely to pottery making, metalworking, or weaving, indicating that people were supported by the city to focus on a single craft. Third, and perhaps most visually striking, is monumental architecture. These are structures whose scale and complexity demanded a centralized authority to organize the labor, like massive defensive walls, grand temples that dominate the skyline, or elaborate palaces. Think of the towering Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan or the vast, engineered Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, structures that served public or elite functions far beyond any single family's needs. These defining features converged in powerful hubs across the ancient world during what we often call the Bronze Age and into the early classical period. Uruk in Mesopotamia with its ziggurats and early writing, Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley with its astonishing urban planning and sanitation, Teotihuacan in the Valley of Mexico, a city of pyramids laid out on a cosmic grid. These were not just population centers, they were engines of innovation, culture, and concentrated power that permanently altered the human story. And when we speak of reconstructing their multiphase expansion, we are acknowledging that these giants were not born overnight. Their growth was not a smooth, continuous line. Instead, it occurred in distinct chapters like the rings of a great tree. Each phase of expansion left behind a unique signature, a layer in the archaeological record with its own preferred pottery styles, its own neighborhood layouts, its own types of public buildings. One phase might show carefully planned streets and administrative buildings, while the next reveals a burst of unplanned housing spilling beyond the old walls. Identifying these phases, these pulses of growth and change, is how we begin to read a city's biography. It is the essential first step before we can even ask the most compelling question: what triggered each new chapter in its life? Peeling back these urban biographies demands a detective's patience and a scientist's precision. The archaeologist's toolkit for this task is a fascinating blend of the timeless and the technologically sublime. At its heart lies the foundational practice of excavation, a slow, meticulous process of revealing history one handful of earth at a time. Here, stratigraphy is the guiding principle, the simple yet profound idea that, barring major disturbances, deeper layers are older than those above them. By carefully recording the sequence of soil, rubble, and construction debris, experts build a relative chronology, a story of what happened before and after. They can see where a grand wall was built directly atop the foundations of a humble home, or where a layer of ash from a great fire separates two distinct eras of pottery. But the modern toolkit extends far beyond the trowel. Technologies like ground-penetrating radar send pulses of energy into the soil, painting a picture of buried walls, roads, and foundations without ever breaking the surface. From the air, LiDAR uses laser pulses to strip away modern forest canopy, revealing the ghostly footprints of entire ancient city grids, road networks, and water management systems hidden for centuries. Then there is the subtle art of ceramic typology. Pottery is the plastic of the ancient world, ubiquitous, breakable, and constantly changing in style. By tracking the evolution of a rim shape, a handle design, or a decorative pattern, archaeologists can date a layer with remarkable precision. A shard of a particular jar can tell you if you are standing in a city's ambitious founding phase or its period of slow decline. It is the combination of all these methods that transforms a collection of ruins into a dynamic narrative. By weaving together the physical sequence of layers, the subsurface maps of unseen structures, and the chronological clues locked in everyday objects, researchers can finally begin to visualize the city's pulse, its rhythms of growth and transformation. To see how this toolkit unlocks a real urban story, let us turn our attention to one of history's most iconic and mysterious planned cities. A city's story always starts with a single magnetic point. Before grand avenues and sprawling districts, there is a place that simply draws people in. Archaeologists call this the Nucleation Event, the moment a location transitions from being just another spot on the landscape to the beating heart of a future metropolis. This focal point was rarely chosen at random. It possessed a powerful gravity, either symbolic or supremely practical. It could be a natural spring deemed sacred by the local people, a defensible hilltop offering safety from conflict, a fertile bend in a river perfect for crops and trade, or a grove of ancient trees seen as the dwelling of ancestors or spirits. This was the seed. Around this nucleus, the first permanent structures of a community beyond simple farming homesteads would coalesce. The initial building was often a shared space that reinforced the very reason people gathered there: a modest temple at the sacred spring, a chieftain's hall on the secure hill, an open area for bartering goods near the fertile land. Think of the legendary founding of Rome not as a single city, but as separate settlements on its famous 7 hills, each a small community drawn to the defensible high ground overlooking the Tiber River. Over time, these hilltop villages began to interact, trade, and eventually merge, with the marshy valley between them becoming the forum, the new shared central place. This nucleation phase establishes the original social and spatial template, the genetic code for everything that follows. The location of that first temple often dictates where the colossal state temple will be built centuries later. The path worn by feet traveling to that first market can fossilize into the city's main thoroughfare. In this quiet, foundational chapter, the community makes its first collective statement about what it values most: safety, spirituality, commerce, or a combination of all three. The stage is now set, but the story of a city is defined by how it manages the immense forces that such success inevitably attracts. Yet a collection of villages does not make a city. The true birth of an urban center comes with its integrative leap, a profound transformation where scattered communities decide, or are compelled, to become one. This is the moment the settlement forges its soul, moving from a loose alliance of neighborhoods to a single, politically unified entity with a shared identity. You can see this leap etched into the landscape itself through ambitious public works that serve the entire population for the first time. Where footpaths once meandered, a standardized road network is laid, deliberately connecting neighborhoods and dictating the flow of people and goods. For defense, the first true city walls rise, a massive communal project that defines a clear us inside from a potential them outside. To feed the growing populace, large-scale irrigation systems are engineered, canals and reservoirs that require centralized management and turn the hinterlands into a breadbasket for the urban core. In Mesopotamia, this integrative phase is spectacularly visible at Uruk. Here, atop an older sacred mound, the White Temple was constructed. This elevated platform temple, visible for miles across the flat plain, was not just a place of worship, it was a powerful statement. It asserted a unifying religious authority and served as an economic hub, collecting and redistributing the agricultural surplus from the surrounding countryside. The temple's very prominence in the skyline signaled that this was no longer a cluster of villages, but a coordinated whole, a city-state with a central nervous system. This integration is what unlocks a city's potential for explosive growth. By creating shared infrastructure and a collective identity, it enables coordinated action on a scale impossible before. The community can now marshal labor for monumental projects, regulate trade, and defend itself as one. The stage, once set with a simple nucleus, is now prepared for the drama of true urban life, a life that often begins with a single, revolutionary act of planning. The leap from integrated village to unified city often unleashes a new kind of ambition, a desire to not just grow, but to build with intention. This is where we encounter the third phase, the planned expansion, a master plot of geometric order imposed upon the landscape. It is the shift from organic settlement to conscious design. When a city's power and population swell to a critical point, its leaders often decide that further growth cannot be left to chance. The result is a breathtaking exercise in social engineering, visible in the bones of the city itself. Streets are laid out in precise, cardinally oriented grids, forming perfect city blocks. Housing plots become standardized, creating a uniform, almost modular urban fabric. Public spaces are allocated with mathematical precision, and infrastructure is integrated from the very beginning. This is not organic sprawl, it is a declaration. It says we are not merely a large group of people, we are a coordinated machine, a society of immense organizational prowess. The classic, almost mythical example of this phase comes from the Indus Valley civilization, with cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Here, over 4,000 years ago, urban planners achieved a level of order that would not be seen again for millennia. Their cities were laid out on a strict north-south, east-west grid. The main streets were wide enough for carts to pass, and they intersected at perfect right angles to create uniform residential blocks. But the planning went far beyond street layout. Each home, though varying in size, was connected to a citywide covered drainage system built from precisely baked bricks. Wastewater flowed from individual houses into street-side channels, which then fed into larger municipal sewers. This was not an upgrade added later, it was part of the original blueprint. Such comprehensive planning reflects a staggering degree of centralized authority and administrative capability. It tells us that a powerful, likely non-royal administrative class could survey land, draft plans, standardize construction materials like bricks, and mobilize and coordinate labor on a city-wide scale for decades. The goal was multifaceted: to efficiently house a booming populace, to manage sanitation and resources with foresight, and to project an undeniable image of control, stability, and advanced civilization. Walking those gridded streets would have been a daily immersion in the power of the state, a physical manifestation of a society that had mastered its own growth. Yet, as history shows, even the most perfect geometric plan is not the final chapter in a city's story. for it must eventually meet the irresistible, messy force of the people who call it home. But a perfect grid is a blueprint for control, not a portrait of a living city. The most fascinating chapters are often written when that control begins to fray, or when it is seized and repurposed by an even greater power. For a select few urban centers, the story of growth takes a final, transformative turn, one defined not by internal planning, but by the sheer, overwhelming force of an empire. This is the phase of Imperial Imprint, where a city is reshaped to serve as the ultimate symbol of conquest and cosmic authority. Growth is no longer organic or even carefully planned for the community's benefit. It is a deliberate act of annexation and monumental propaganda. The city expands by absorbing surrounding towns and lands, drawing their wealth and labor not through trade, but through tribute and obligation. The driving force becomes the need to showcase supreme, often divinely sanctioned power to both conquered subjects and visiting ambassadors. The architecture of this phase loses all sense of human scale. Think of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Darius the Great and his successors did not build a city for people to live in. They built a colossal stage set upon a vast artificial terrace. Its famous Apollona Palace, with its towering columns topped by bull and lion capitals, was designed for one primary purpose: to host delegations from every corner of the empire during the New Year festival. These representatives would climb the grand ceremonial staircase, passing reliefs depicting their own people bringing gifts, and present their tribute directly to the King of Kings. The city's layout was a physical map of imperial ideology, a statement that all the world's diversity was now ordered under a single, unchallengeable throne. Similarly, the core design of the Forbidden City in Beijing, though from a later era, follows this same imperial logic. It is a city within a city, a strictly ordered sequence of gates, courtyards, and halls along a central north-south axis, each step deepening the visitor's sense of moving toward the sacred, secluded figure of the Son of Heaven. This is architecture as psychological theater, using overwhelming scale, axial symmetry, and controlled procession to instill awe and reinforce a cosmic hierarchy. In this phase, the urban center transcends its own physical needs. It becomes a machine for legitimizing power, its very stones shouting the glory of the empire that built it. Yet, even these stone proclamations are not immune to the most relentless force of all, the quiet, patient work of time and change. But even the grandest imperial design must eventually house the lives of ordinary people. The blueprint for a perfect city, whether drawn by planners or emperors, is only the first draft of its story. The true, vibrant narrative is written in the spaces between the monuments, in a process archaeologists call organic infill. This is the phase where the rigid geometry of a master plan meets the wonderfully messy reality of daily human need. After the main avenues are laid, the temples raised, and the palaces completed, the city begins to breathe and adapt from within. The large, empty blocks left by the planners, the spaces behind the grand facades, slowly fill up. This is not expansion outward, but intensification inward. It is the realm of the workshop crammed into a courtyard, the extra room added to a house for a growing family, the impromptu market that springs up where two alleyways meet. We see this vividly at Teotihuacan. The city's central ceremonial avenue, the Street of the Dead, is a breathtaking feat of axial planning, lined with massive pyramids. But step away from this spine into the residential compounds, and a different story unfolds. Over time, these large, standardized apartment complexes were subdivided. New walls were built, creating smaller, more private living spaces. Courtyards were partially covered to create sheltered workshops for obsidian knappers or ceramic painters. The archaeological record shows modifications piled upon modifications, a clear sign that the original, uniform plan was being constantly tweaked and personalized by generations of inhabitants. This organic infill is a treasure trove for understanding social complexity. It reveals the city's economic pulse in the clustering of specific crafts in certain neighborhoods. It shows how families manage their space across generations. Most importantly, it gives a voice to the ordinary citizens who are often silent in the grand inscriptions and official histories. Their needs for privacy, for livelihood, for community, literally reshaped the stone and mortar around them. The city becomes a living negotiation between top-down order and bottom-up life, a dialogue etched permanently into its very fabric. This constant adaptation is a sign of a healthy, thriving urban center, one capable of evolving with its people. Yet, this very dynamism, this constant push and pull between plan and reality, creates a unique kind of tension that can define a city's character for centuries. That dialogue between plan and life is recorded in the layers of earth, but to understand its tempo we need a calendar. The relative sequence of a city's phases tells us what came before what, but it cannot tell us when. To transform that story from a sequence of events into a timeline with dates, we must turn to the chronometers of civilization itself, the natural clocks hidden in wood and bone. Two techniques in particular allow us to assign absolute dates to these chapters of urban growth, turning archaeological layers into years on a calendar. The first is dendrochronology, or tree ring dating. When ancient builders used timber for a roof beam, a foundation post, or even a tool handle, they preserved a perfect environmental record. Each year a tree grows, it adds a new ring. Wide rings indicate good growing seasons, narrow rings indicate drought or hardship. By studying these patterns in ancient wood, scientists can match them to master chronological sequences built from living trees and older specimens. If they find a match, they can pinpoint the exact year, and sometimes even the season, that tree was cut down for construction. It is like finding a receipt with a date stamped on it, buried for millennia. The second, more widely used technique is radiocarbon dating. All living things absorb a tiny, constant amount of a radioactive isotope called carbon-14. When they pass, the absorption stops and that carbon-14 begins to decay at a steady, measurable rate. By analyzing the remaining amount in an organic sample, a charred seed from a cooking fire, a fragment of animal bone from a feast, a piece of charcoal from a workshop, scientists can calculate a statistical range of dates for when that organism lived. It is not a single year, but a highly probable window of time, often spanning a few decades. The true power comes from weaving these methods together. Imagine excavating a city wall. From the foundation trench, you recover charcoal from the fires that fed the workers who built it. Radiocarbon dates that charcoal to a range centered around, say, 3,200 years ago. Later, in a house built directly against the inside of that wall, you find a wooden loom weight. Dendrochronology on that wood tells you the tree was felled precisely in the year 1147 before Common Era. Now you have a bracket. The wall was built sometime around 3,200 years ago, and we know it was already standing by 1147 before Common Era, because someone built their home leaning on it. Layer by layer, sample by sample, this scientific rigor transforms our understanding. We move from saying the imperial phase came after the planned phase to stating the planned grid was laid down around 250 before Common Era, and the imperial annexation began by 100 before Common Era. This concrete calendar lets us correlate a city's growth pulses with historical events, climate shifts, and the rise and fall of neighboring powers. We can ask new questions. Did a period of rapid organic infill follow a time of great prosperity, or did it come during a time of collapsing central authority? The silent stones begin to speak in years and decades, and the biography of the city gains its proper pace. A city's story is written not just in its stones but in the very dirt beneath them. To truly understand the forces that guided an ancient metropolis, we must learn to read the earth itself, a field known as geoarchaeology. This discipline moves beyond the artifacts and walls to study the soils, sediments, and geological context of an entire site. It asks, what did this landscape look like before the first foundation was laid? How did the environment change as the city grew? And how, in turn, did the city's growth reshape the land around it? This is the story of a dynamic, often tense, dialogue between human ambition and the natural world. Geoarchaeologists act as landscape detectives. By extracting long, cylindrical cores of sediment from the ground near a city, they obtain a vertical timeline of environmental history. Each layer of silt, clay, or organic matter holds clues. A thick band of fine sand might point to an ancient flood that inundated the city's outskirts. A layer rich in charcoal and ash could signal a period of intensive human activity, perhaps land clearance for agriculture or even a devastating fire. Pollen grains preserved in these layers tell scientists what plants were growing nearby, revealing shifts from wild forests to cultivated fields. This environmental record is crucial for solving some of urban history's biggest puzzles. Why did a thriving port city suddenly decline? A geoarchaeological core from its harbor might show a rapid buildup of silt, revealing that upstream deforestation by the growing city caused erosion that choked its own lifeline to the sea. Why did a city expand in one direction but not another? Soil analysis might show that the preferred direction had richer, more stable soils, while the other led toward easily flooded marshland or land exhausted by overfarming. Consider the great city of Angkor in Southeast Asia. Its vast urban sprawl was supported by an elaborate network of canals, reservoirs, and managed waterways. By studying sediment cores from these ancient barrays or water tanks, researchers have reconstructed a history of water management and climate stress. They can see periods when the system was meticulously maintained, and later periods when sediment clogged the canals, possibly due to intense monsoon rains or a breakdown in centralized maintenance. This environmental evidence adds a critical layer to the historical narrative, showing how the city's fate was intertwined with its ability to manage a volatile hydrological system. The ground tells us that cities are not static islands of culture. They are active participants in an ecological relationship, constantly adapting to and altering their home. The grandest temple reveals power, but the humblest trash heap reveals life. For all the majesty of pyramids and palaces, the most intimate portrait of an ancient city's daily pulse is often found in its discarded remnants, the ancient garbage dumps we call middens. These are not random piles of refuse, but carefully stratified archives of everyday existence, layer upon layer of broken pottery, shattered tools, animal bones, and food waste, each stratum a chapter in the city's social and economic story. Where a king's inscription boasts of conquest, a midden whispers of what people ate for dinner, what they traded for, and how their fortunes rose and fell. By sifting through these time capsules, archaeologists become biographers of the ordinary, reconstructing the rhythms that truly defined urban life. The composition of a midden is a direct reflection of the community that created it. A layer rich in the bones of wild game and locally made, simple pottery might tell of a city's early, self-sufficient phase. Then, in a higher, later layer, a dramatic shift occurs. Suddenly, the animal bones are mostly from domesticated herds, suggesting centralized provisioning. The pottery fragments change, too, with local styles giving way to shards of fine, imported ware, perhaps from a distant region. This single change in the garbage tells a profound story. It signals a phase of expanded trade networks and increased wealth, where the city was now connected enough that its citizens could afford luxuries from afar. The midden becomes a ledger of economic connection. Beyond economics, these refuse heaps chronicle social change. In a planned city with uniform housing, you might expect uniform middens. But often they are not. Excavations in different neighborhoods can reveal stark contrasts. A midden from a district near the palace might contain evidence of expensive cuts of meat, exotic spices, and delicate glassware. Just a few streets away, a contemporary midden from a craftworker's quarter might yield bones from cheaper, tougher meats, simpler local pottery, and a high concentration of manufacturing debris like broken molds or slag from metalworking. This pattern in the trash paints a clear picture of social stratification, of a city where wealth and access to goods were not evenly distributed. The garbage tells us who had plenty and who made do. Even technology leaves its mark in the dump. The sudden appearance of a new type of metal slag or a new style of stone tool blank in the layers can pinpoint the moment a new craft or technique was adopted by the city's artisans. A gradual increase in fish bones and shellfish remains in a city located inland might indicate the development of more efficient food preservation or transportation methods, linking the urban center to a coastal supply chain. Each discarded object, no matter how broken, is a data point in the story of innovation and adaptation. By reading this material diary, we move beyond the architects and emperors to hear the voices of the cooks, the traders, the potters, and the families whose daily choices, written in their waste, ultimately shaped the living, breathing entity of the city itself. The biography of Teotihuacan is a masterclass in the multiphase model, a story written in stone on a truly monumental scale. Its origins are rooted in the earth itself, a classic nucleation event centered on a place of profound spiritual gravity. Long before the first pyramid, people were drawn to a natural cave system here, a portal to the underworld in Mesoamerican belief. This sacred landscape, with its life-giving springs, formed the magnetic seed. Around this spiritual nucleus, a small settlement took hold, its people connected to a place they believed was the very origin of creation. The integrative leap that followed was nothing short of breathtaking in its ambition and speed. Sometime around the 1st century of the Common Era, the community made a collective decision that would echo for centuries. They embarked on a staggering public works project, deliberately burying the old sacred cave and constructing directly above it the Pyramid of the Sun, one of the largest structures ever built in the ancient Americas. Simultaneously, they laid out the colossal central axis of their future city, the Street of the Dead, and began work on the Pyramid of the Moon at its northern terminus. This was not mere growth, it was a conscious act of forging a new, unified identity. By building these colossal markers, they transformed a sacred landscape into a sacred city, creating a ceremonial core that demanded participation from everyone. This integrative phase established Teotihuacan as a coordinated society capable of marshalling thousands of workers for generations. The result of this foundational vision was a perfect example of planned expansion executed with geometric precision. The entire city, eventually housing well over 100,000 people, was laid out on a grid aligned just east of true north, following the orientation of the Pyramid of the Sun. The Street of the Dead served as the central spine, and everything was plotted in relation to it. Most revealing are the 2,000-plus standardized residential compounds, often called apartment complexes. These were not organic clusters of homes, but large, walled blocks subdivided into uniform apartments around central courtyards, built according to a shared template. This was social engineering in stone, a deliberate plan to house a diverse, growing population in an orderly, manageable way. While Teotihuacan was not the capital of a conquest empire in the style of later Aztecs or Romans, its influence created a distinct form of Imperial Imprint. Its cultural and religious power became a gravitational force across Mesoamerica. The city's distinctive art style, its gods, and its architectural motifs appear in distant centers. Its merchants likely controlled key trade routes for obsidian, a vital resource. This was an empire of ideology and commerce, its imprint made not through provincial governors but through the widespread adoption of its symbols and the sheer awe its physical form inspired. Visiting dignitaries from across the region would have walked the street of the dead, dwarfed by the pyramids, and understood they were in the presence of a power that shaped their world. Teotihuacan shows us that the phases of urban growth are not a rigid checklist, but a flexible framework. Here, the Integrative Leap and the planned expansion were essentially one continuous, visionary act, and the Imperial Imprint was cultural rather than purely political. Its story reminds us that the blueprint for a city is ultimately a blueprint for a society's highest aspirations. Mohenjo-Daro stands as a silent testament to a puzzle wrapped in perfect geometry. While Teotihuacan's story unfolded in visible chapters, the Indus Valley civilization presents us with a different kind of mystery, one where the most brilliant phase of urban life seems to have appeared almost fully formed. The city's signature is its breathtakingly rational grid, a masterwork of early urban planning that speaks of a society that valued order, hygiene, and collective welfare on a scale unmatched in its time. Streets intersect at precise right angles, creating uniform city blocks. The bricks used throughout the city, from the foundations of grand structures to the walls of modest homes, are standardized to a consistent ratio, as if produced in a single, vast municipal factory. And beneath those orderly streets runs one of the ancient world's most sophisticated achievements, a covered, city-wide drainage system with inspection manholes, a network designed to manage waste and water with foresight that feels startlingly modern. This is the planned expansion phase in its most pristine and mature expression, yet this very perfection is the source of the enigma. Where are the rough drafts? A city this coherent does not spring from nothing. The grid of Mohenjo-Daro is so advanced, so complete, that it effectively obscures its own origins. It presents us with a civilization that seems to have skipped the tentative steps of nucleation and messy integration, leaping directly to a state of urban maturity. This absence is a profound question mark in the archaeological record. What were the earlier formative phases like? Did a collection of villages along the Indus River gradually coalesce, perhaps around a vital trade crossing or a shared religious site, before deciding to rebuild everything according to a grand new design? Or was the city founded as a deliberate colony, its grid drawn on a blank slate by a central authority with a preconceived vision of the ideal city? The answers likely lie buried deep, perhaps beneath meters of silt deposited by the shifting Indus River over millennia, or in smaller, older settlements nearby that have yet to be fully excavated. The river that gave the civilization life may also be hiding its childhood. Reconstructing the multiphase expansion here is a unique challenge, because the most visible and dazzling phase urges us to look not just backward, but also sideways, to imagine the social and ideological revolution that must have preceded such astonishing coherence. It forces us to ask what kind of societal agreement, what shared belief in order and cleanliness, was so powerful that it could imprint itself so perfectly onto an entire city of brick and stone. The silence of Mohenjo-Daro, therefore, is not an empty silence but a resonant one, inviting us to listen for the echoes of the decisions that made such silence possible. While a city's walls and streets define its body, its true life force flows through unseen connections. The physical expansion we can map with lidar and excavation is only half the story. The other half is written in the movement of objects and ideas. This is the realm of social and economic networks, the invisible framework that animated every street and marketplace. To reconstruct this hidden anatomy, archaeologists become forensic accountants of the ancient world, tracking not coins but the distribution of distinctive artifacts. A shard of pottery with a unique glaze, a carved stone seal used to stamp goods, a fragment of obsidian from a distant volcano, these are the data points. By plotting where these objects are found across a city and across its different phases of growth, researchers can begin to map the city's functional heartbeat. They can trace the arteries of long-distance trade, revealing that the copper in a craftsman's workshop came from mines hundreds of miles away. They can identify the veins of local commerce, showing how certain neighborhoods specialized in weaving textiles while others focused on milling grain. This analysis turns a static map of buildings into a dynamic diagram of relationships and flows. For instance, if a specific, fine style of painted pottery is found exclusively in the large residential compounds near the main temple from the city's very first planned phase, it tells a powerful story. It suggests that social elites, those with access to luxury goods, were not a later development but were embedded in the city's original design. Their status and connections were part of the foundational blueprint. Conversely, if evidence for metalworking like slag and broken molds only appears in a new district during a later phase of organic infill, it indicates a deliberate shift. Perhaps the city's rulers decided to relocate noisy, smoky, or ritually impure industries to a dedicated zone on the outskirts, a form of ancient urban zoning that reveals both practical planning and social attitudes. By layering these economic maps over the chronological phases of physical growth, we see a city develop in 4 dimensions. We watch as a trade route for exotic shells establishes itself during the integrative phase, bringing not just goods but new cultural influences. We observe how a period of Imperial Imprint might be marked by a sudden influx of standardized administrative ceilings, showing the tightening grip of a central bureaucracy on economic life. The distribution of a simple item like a common type of grinding stone can even reveal social boundaries. If every home in one neighborhood has one, but they are scarce in another, it might indicate differences in daily diet or self-sufficiency, subtle clues to inequality written in stone tools. Reconstructing these networks shows us that a city is not just a collection of structures, but a living system. Its physical growth and its web of human connections are 2 sides of the same coin, each shaping and driving the other in a continuous dance of adaptation and change. These invisible networks of trade and ideas were all sustained by a fragile foundation, the environment itself. A city's most dramatic growth spurts and its most painful contractions are often not decisions but reactions. Urban expansion rarely follows a smooth, upward curve. Instead, it pulses like a heartbeat, quickening and slowing in direct response to the climate and the availability of vital resources. Imagine a prolonged period of reliable rainfall and mild temperatures. Rivers run full, harvests are bountiful, and pastures are green. In such a window of abundance, a city's population can boom. Surplus food supports more specialists, more artisans, and more laborers. This is when we see the signature of a growth pulse in the archaeological record, a rapid phase of new neighborhood construction, the raising of new temple platforms, and the extension of city walls to encompass the swelling populace. The ambitious grid of a planned expansion is often laid down in precisely such a moment of confidence and plenty. But the environment is not a static backdrop, it is a dynamic partner, and its favor can withdraw. A series of drought years, a shift in monsoon patterns, or the exhaustion of nearby forests for fuel and timber creates a powerful counterpressure. The city must contract. Outlying districts, those farthest from reliable water sources, might be abandoned first. Grand construction projects halt midway. The archaeological layers from such a period might show houses being subdivided into smaller units, a sign of economic hardship, or a layer of wind-blown silt covering once busy streets. In extreme cases, the entire urban project can unravel, leading to what we term collapse, a dispersal of the population back to a more sustainable, village-based way of life. Today, we can correlate these archaeological pulses with hard climate data. Scientists study ice cores from glaciers and sediment cores from ancient lake beds. which preserve a year-by-year record of past temperatures, rainfall, and even atmospheric conditions. By aligning the tree ring dates from a city's construction timbers with the drought patterns recorded in a nearby lake core, a vivid story emerges. We might see that the city's great integrative phase, the building of its massive reservoir, coincides perfectly with a 50-year period of exceptional rainfall. Conversely, we might find that a layer of ash and rubble, once interpreted as evidence of invasion, actually aligns with a severe, multi-generational drought that likely sparked internal conflict over dwindling resources. This perspective transforms our understanding. It shows us that the history of urban centers is not merely a chronicle of kings and conquests, but a profound dialogue between human ambition and planetary reality. A city's grandest monuments are not just expressions of power, they are also acts of faith, bets placed against an uncertain climate. Its periods of quiet struggle, visible in the patched walls and shrinking homes, are testaments to resilience and adaptation. To see a city in this light is to understand it as a living system, breathing in sync with the land that sustains it, forever navigating the delicate balance between growth and sustainability. The silent dialogue between a city and its climate is recorded in the soil, but to give it meaning we need a framework of thought. How we interpret the layers of stone and sediment is profoundly shaped by the theoretical models we bring to the excavation. For decades, the dominant lens was provided by the archaeologist V. Gordon Childer and his concept of the urban revolution. He proposed a dramatic, almost explosive package of traits writing monumental architecture, social stratification, and economic specialization that appeared together to mark the revolutionary leap from village to city. It was a powerful, clean narrative that framed urbanism as a distinct stage in human progress, a checklist of achievements. This top-down perspective naturally led us to look for the brilliant rulers, the visionary planners, the singular geniuses who orchestrated this revolution from above. Our reconstructions focused on palaces and temples, seeing cities as the direct products of concentrated power. The multiphase expansion, in this view, was a series of commands issued from a central throne. Yet, as the archaeological record grew richer and more complex, this model began to feel too neat, too passive. It portrayed ordinary citizens as mere followers of a grand design, their lives simply filling in the spaces between monuments. Modern approaches have shifted the focus dramatically, turning the lens downward to emphasize agency, incremental change, and bottom-up processes. Scholars now ask different questions. How did the cumulative daily decisions of countless individuals, a potter choosing to trade with a new caravan, a family adding a room to their home, a neighborhood agreeing to maintain a shared well slowly, collectively shape the urban form? This perspective sees the city not as an executed blueprint, but as a continual negotiation. Theoretical tools like collective action theory examine how communities, perhaps without a coercive king, cooperated to build and manage essential infrastructure like irrigation canals or defensive walls. It explores the social contracts and shared beliefs that made such large-scale cooperation possible. Meanwhile, network theory maps the webs of connectivity, trade routes, marriage alliances, information flow that linked neighborhoods within a city and tied the city to a wider world. These connections become the invisible scaffolding upon which physical growth depends. Each theoretical lens illuminates a different facet of the truth. The top-down model helps explain the breathtaking speed of a planned expansion at Teotihuacan. The agency-based approach makes sense of the organic infill that followed, as people personalized their standardized apartments. The collective action model might unravel how the first integrative leap at a place like Uruk was even possible. These frameworks are not rivals, they are complementary filters. They shape the very questions we whisper to the ruins. Do we ask who commanded this wall to be built? Or do we ask what shared need compelled a community to build it together? The answer we seek determines what evidence we value most, coloring every layer of our reconstruction with a different hue of human intention. The perfect clarity of a theoretical model meets the wonderfully messy reality of dirt and stone. In the ground, the story of a city's growth is never a series of clean, separate chapters laid out in a textbook. Instead, it is a palimpsest, an ancient manuscript where scribes would scrape away old text to write something new, leaving ghostly traces of the original words beneath the surface. A city is built in exactly this way, each generation writing its story directly over the last, creating a tangled, overlapping record where time itself seems to collapse. A single temple platform might have its foundations laid during a city's ambitious integrative leap, its facade gloriously renovated centuries later to suit an imperial ruler's taste, and then, in a period of decline or transformation, find its sacred precinct crowded with the modest homes of a new community during a phase of organic infill. All of these events, separated by hundreds of years, are physically compressed into one archaeological site. The challenge for researchers is not just to find these layers, but to disentangle them, to separate the threads of different eras that are woven into the very fabric of a single wall. This demands a form of forensic historiography, a microscopic attention to detail. Archaeologists become architectural detectives, examining the seams where one building phase meets another. They look for changes in construction technique, perhaps a shift from roughly dressed stone to finely cut ashlar blocks, signaling a new investment of wealth and skill. They note where old materials like bricks or column drums from a demolished building have been reused in a later wall, a clear sign of both practicality and changing priorities. Most importantly, they rely on the fundamental law of stratigraphy, carefully mapping the physical relationships between structures. They must determine which wall is built up against another, which floor cuts through an older foundation trench, which layer of artifacts was deposited after a courtyard was paved over. It is a three-dimensional logic puzzle where every stone is a clue. Consider a city block excavated in Rome. The team might first uncover a row of small shops from the medieval period. But as they dig deeper, they find those shops were built directly into the crumbling shell of a Roman insula, a large apartment building, and beneath that, the foundations of that insula are seen to cut through the mosaic floor of a wealthy Republican-era villa. Three distinct societies, three different ways of urban life, all occupying the exact same footprint of Earth across 1,000 years. Untangling this palimpsest is painstaking, often millimeter by millimeter, but it is the only way to recover the true, complex biography of a place. It reveals that a city is not a sequence of replacements, but a continuous conversation between its past and its present, where every new phase is in silent dialogue with the ghosts of the phases beneath. These ghostly traces beneath our feet now find new life in the digital realm. The painstaking work of disentangling a city's palimpsest has been transformed by a technological revolution, one that allows us to not just read the layers but to walk through them. This is the era of digital resurrection, where geographic information systems and three-dimensional modeling are rebuilding ancient urban centers with a clarity that was once the stuff of pure imagination. A geographic information system is at its heart a hyper-intelligent map. It is a digital platform where archaeologists can plot every single artifact, every wall foundation, every hearth, and every burial, each with its precise coordinates and its associated data, like its material, its date range, and which layer it came from. This is far more than creating a pretty picture. It is about revealing invisible patterns. Researchers can ask the system to show them only the pottery shards from a specific 50-year period, and instantly, a map of density appears. They can see clusters of wealth, the spread of a craft industry, or the exact path of a road as it shifted over 3 centuries. This spatial analysis turns scattered points into a narrative of movement and change, showing how a city's economic heart migrated from one district to another, or how defensive concerns reshaped neighborhood layouts over time. But the true magic happens when this rich, layered data is fed into three-dimensional modeling software. Here, the points and lines on a map rise from the ground to become structures, streetscapes, and entire cityscapes. We are no longer looking at a flat plan of Mohenjo-Daro's grid. We can don a virtual reality headset and stand at the intersection of two of its major streets, looking down the long, straight vista toward the elevated citadel. The scale becomes palpable, the order immersive. More powerfully, these models become active laboratories. An archaeologist can test a hypothesis about social control by calculating the lines of sight from a palace balcony. Could the ruler see the main gate? Could the temple priests monitor the marketplace? The software can simulate the answer. We can digitally deconstruct a temple, removing the imperial era facade to reveal the simpler shrine that stood there 500 years earlier. We can simulate sunlight and shadow at the summer solstice, testing if a city's central axis was aligned to capture a specific celestial event. This process of digital peeling and testing allows researchers to experience urban space as its ancient inhabitants did, to feel the intended awe of a ceremonial approach or the cramped intimacy of a bustling artisan's quarter. These are not just illustrations for a documentary, they are rigorous tools for discovery. By rebuilding a city in silicon, we are forced to confront the gaps in our knowledge, to make informed decisions about roof pitch, wall height, and surface color, each choice deepening our engagement with the reality we are trying to recover. The digital model becomes a new kind of dialogue with the past, one where we can ask not just what was built, but how it felt to be there, and in doing so, we breathe a temporary, illuminating life back into the silent stones. The digital model is a masterpiece of informed imagination, but its light also casts long, definitive shadows. Every reconstruction, no matter how detailed, must finally confront the silent voids in its own story. The archaeological record is not a complete book. It is a collection of surviving pages, many torn, faded, or written over. This inherent fragmentation shapes everything we think we know. Organic materials, the very stuff of daily life, wood, cloth, leather, food, most of it vanishes with time, leaving behind only the durable bones of a society, its stone, pottery, and metal. Later generations constantly recycle the past, quarrying older walls for new buildings, leveling ancient neighborhoods for fresh foundations, erasing entire chapters of urban biography in the process. And even at the most extensively studied sites, we have physically uncovered only a minuscule percentage of the total city, often less than 10%. Our view is a series of tiny, brilliant spotlights in a vast darkness. This evidence is also profoundly biased. Monumental architecture, built to last from stone and baked brick, shouts its presence across millennia. The Grand Temple, the Palace Wall, the massive gate, these survive and dominate our attention. Similarly, the districts of the elite, often built on higher, more stable ground with better materials, leave a clearer, richer signature. But the modest homes of the majority, constructed from perishable mud, brick, wood, and thatch, leave only faint stains in the earth, subtle patterns of post holes and compacted floors that are easily missed or destroyed. The material record inherently amplifies the voices of power and wealth, while the everyday lives of the poor, the laborers, the marginalized whisper to us from a much fainter frequency. We can map the palace quarter with precision, but the sprawling, vibrant, lower town neighborhood where most people lived may survive only as a vague scatter of pottery and the ghostly outline of a single salvaged lane. Perhaps the most profound gap lies in the intangible. We can excavate a law courts building, but we cannot recover the specific arguments made within its walls. We can find a schoolroom's tablets, but we cannot hear the teacher's voice or the student's questions. We can reconstruct a temple's ritual layout, but the fervent prayers, the shared emotional experience of the ceremony, the precise nuance of the belief that motivated it all, these have evaporated. Our reconstructions show the stage and the props with increasing accuracy, but the play itself, the dialogue, the motivations, and the unspoken social rules that guided every interaction remain largely a matter of informed interpretation. Recognizing these limits is not an admission of failure, it is the cornerstone of honest scholarship. It draws the crucial line between what we can solidly claim from physical evidence and where we must transition to careful, transparent speculation. This boundary is not a barrier to understanding, but a guidepost, reminding us that the silent spaces between the artifacts are where curiosity lives, prompting the next generation of questions and the next technological leap to try, once more, to listen for the echoes we have not yet learned to hear. The silent spaces between our spotlights of evidence invite us to step back and see the whole map. To truly understand the phenomenon of the early city, we cannot look at just one civilization in isolation. We must place them side by side, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the meticulous grids of the Indus, the cosmic axes of Mesoamerica, and the rammed earth foundations of China's Yellow River Valley. This is the practice of comparative urbanism, and it asks a powerful question: were the forces that built Uruk the same ones that built Teotihuacan? In the search for universal patterns, we find a profound truth: the challenges were shared, but the human imagination in solving them was gloriously diverse. Every emerging urban center, regardless of continent, faced the same core dilemmas. How do you feed a dense, non-farming population? How do you manage water for both daily life and to prevent catastrophic floods? How do you maintain social order among thousands of strangers living in close quarters? The pressure of these universal challenges often pushed societies toward similar-looking solutions, like central storage facilities for grain, large-scale defensive walls, and standardized forms of housing. This can create an illusion of a single, inevitable path. Yet, when we look closer, the fascinating divergences appear, shaped by environment, belief, and historical accident. Consider the role of central authority. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, the evidence points strongly toward a powerful, often divine kingship as the engine behind massive irrigation projects and pyramid construction. The narrative there is top-down, but in the Indus Valley, the picture is strikingly different. We find no obvious palaces, no grandiose royal tombs, no larger-than-life statues of kings. Instead, we see that astonishing city-wide drainage system and uniform brick sizes. This suggests a different kind of power, perhaps a more bureaucratic, civic authority focused on collective welfare and standardization. A society that invested its surplus in infrastructure rather than in aggrandizing a single ruler. It challenges the assumption that all early cities required a charismatic god-king to coalesce. Then, cross the ocean to the Americas, and another fundamental difference reshapes the urban form: the absence of the wheel and domesticated draft animals like horses or oxen. In the Old World, the wheel revolutionized the transport of heavy goods and building materials over land. In Mesoamerica and the Andes, every stone for a pyramid, every sack of maize, every trade good, was moved by human muscle, using tumplines, sledges, and sheer coordinated labor. This did not prevent the rise of massive cities, it simply dictated a different logistics of power. It may have encouraged a greater reliance on water transport via canals and causeways, and it certainly meant that the social contract demanding communal labor for construction projects had to be exceptionally strong. The city was built literally on the backs of its citizens, requiring a different kind of persuasion or coercion than a king commanding ox carts. Comparing these pathways protects us from a single, simplistic story. It shows us that urbanism is not a checklist invented in one place and copied elsewhere. It is a versatile set of principles, a toolkit for living together at scale. The Mesopotamians used that toolkit to build a society oriented around temple and palace. The Indus peoples used it to build one of history's most practical and orderly civic experiments. The Mesoamericans used it to build cities that were maps of the cosmos itself. By holding these mirrors up to each other, we see not a march of progress, but a garden of possibilities, each city a unique answer to the universal question of how we can live and thrive together. That enduring question of how to live together echoes in the stone of every modern metropolis. The ghosts of ancient urban plans do not haunt ruins, they walk invisibly down our own city streets. The logic that organized Mohenjo-Daro 4,000 years ago, its efficient grid of streets designed for movement and access, is the same foundational logic behind the planned districts of countless modern cities, from New York to Barcelona. It is a testament to a solution so elegant, so effective for managing dense populations, that human ingenuity has returned to it across millennia. The vast, open ceremonial plaza at the heart of Teotihuacan, designed for collective ritual and civic gathering, finds its direct descendant in our modern civic squares, our grand piazzas, and our national malls. These are not accidents of design, but the evolution of a fundamental human need, a space for the community to see itself, to celebrate, to protest, to simply be together in the heart of the machine. More strikingly, the core challenges that kept ancient administrators awake at night are, in essence, our challenges today. The engineers of the Indus Valley wrestled with urban sanitation, creating covered drains to manage waste and protect public health, a constant concern for any modern mayor. The rulers of Rome grappled with traffic congestion, leading to laws restricting cart traffic during daylight hours in the city center, a precursor to our own congestion pricing and pedestrian zones. The stark contrast between the spacious villas on the Palatine Hill and the cramped insulae across Rome speaks to ancient housing inequality, a social tension that shapes the geography of every major city on the planet today. The problems of density, resource distribution, and social cohesion are not new. They are the intrinsic conditions of urban life itself. This is why reconstructing the multiphase expansion of these early centers is far more than an academic exercise. It provides us with a deep time perspective, a long view of urban living. We see cities not as static creations, but as resilient, adaptive entities that pulse through cycles of growth, stasis, contraction, and reinvention across centuries. We observe how they responded to climate stress, to economic shifts, to the strain of their own success. Some adapted ingeniously, retooling their infrastructure or renegotiating their social contracts. Others ultimately fractured under the pressure. These are not just stories of the past, they are case studies written in the landscape of time. Understanding these long-term growth cycles holds profound lessons for contemporary urban sustainability and planning. When we see how the over-exploitation of nearby forests for fuel and construction contributed to the environmental pressures on an ancient city, it mirrors our own concerns about resource footprints and urban heat islands. When we trace how a city's successful integration phase relied on a shared belief system or a fair system of resource distribution, it highlights the non-physical infrastructure, the social and cultural cohesion, that is just as critical as roads and pipes. The ancient past becomes a laboratory of human adaptation, offering a catalogue of strategies, both successful and catastrophic, for managing life at scale. This ancient history, therefore, is not locked away. It is a surprisingly relevant guidebook, reminding us that the future of our own urban centers will be written not just by our technology, but by our wisdom in navigating the eternal dialogue between human ambition and the limits of the world we build upon. The stories we have been reconstructing are about to gain a new, microscopic narrator, While maps and monuments show us the scale of a city, a silent revolution is now unfolding in the laboratory, one that reads the biological whispers left behind by the people themselves. This is the frontier of biomolecular archaeology, a field that peers into the very cells and chemical residues of the past to reconstruct the intimate realities of urban life. By analyzing ancient DNA, proteins, and fats preserved in the most unexpected places in the crust inside a cooking pot, in the hardened plaque on ancient teeth, in the very soil of a city floor, scientists are beginning to write biographies of the body within the metropolis. They can now identify from a genetic fragment in a burial which pathogens caused widespread illness in a crowded neighborhood. They can extract the chemical signature of a millet-based beer or a feast of lamb from a pottery shard, detailing not just what was eaten, but how it was prepared and shared. Even more remarkably, by studying isotopes locked into human bone, researchers can trace an individual's lifetime journey. The water and food we consume leave a distinct geochemical signature in our skeletons. A person born in one valley but buried in a city hundreds of miles away carries that story in their bones, allowing us to map ancient migration with stunning personal detail. This moves us from the architecture of the city to the lived experience of its inhabitants. We shift from asking how many people lived there to asking what their daily health was like, what hardships they faced, and where their personal stories began. Alongside this, a new field is emerging, the study of the ancient urban microbiome. Just as our bodies host communities of microbes, so did cities. By sequencing the ancient microbial DNA preserved in layers of soil and sediment, scientists can detect the invisible fingerprints of daily activity. A concentration of certain gut bacteria in a soil sample might pinpoint the location of an ancient latrine or waste dump, revealing how a community managed sanitation. A shift in microbial communities over time could show the introduction of new animals or crops, or even the biological impact of a new cleaning or industrial practice. This molecular evidence adds a profoundly intimate layer to our understanding. It tells us not just that a city had a drainage system, but whether it actually worked to protect public health. It reveals not just that trade existed, but that a merchant from afar brought with them a strain of a common childhood illness to which the local population had no resistance. These are the stories of individual resilience and vulnerability, written in a language of molecules waiting in the dirt to be read. They promise to complete our picture of the ancient city, not as a sterile plan, but as a throbbing, breathing, biological entity, where every phase of expansion was also a story of countless human lives adapting, struggling, and thriving within its walls. This molecular story of individual lives is now being written with the hands of those who live on the same land today. The most profound shift in how we reconstruct ancient cities is not just technological, it is human. For decades, archaeology was a conversation between experts and the silent past. But a new chapter has opened, one where the local community holds a vital seat at the table. This is the heart of public archaeology, the understanding that the history buried beneath a modern town is not just data for a research paper, it is a shared heritage, a story that belongs first and foremost to the people whose roots are intertwined with that very soil. When a dig invites neighbors, students, and local historians to carefully sift the earth, something transformative happens. The past ceases to be an abstract concept in a textbook and becomes a tangible, personal discovery. A farmer might uncover a tool used by an ancestor who tilled the same land millennia ago. A child might find a potsherd and suddenly feel a direct link to a child who played in that same spot centuries before. This hands-on participation changes the narrative from something done to a community to something done with and for it. The technical process of reconstructing a city's phases gains a deeper layer of meaning when the interpretations are woven with local knowledge, oral histories, and a sense of custodianship. For instance, a project excavating a neighborhood in an ancient Mesopotamian city might work with modern residents to understand traditional building techniques or local place names that have been passed down for generations. This collaboration ensures the final story is not a cold, detached model, but a living narrative that resonates. It transforms preservation from a rule imposed by distant authorities into a collective act of care, a shared responsibility to protect a legacy that is now personally felt. This bridge between ancient stones and modern identity is perhaps the most important reconstruction of all. It builds stewardship, ensuring that the physical remains of these early urban experiments are valued and protected by the very communities that live in their long shadow. It acknowledges that the ultimate meaning of a city's biography is not locked in its stratigraphy alone, but in its continued ability to connect people across time, to remind us that the challenges and triumphs of urban life are a story we are all still writing together. This profound responsibility to the past demands an equally profound ethical framework. Every trowel that breaks the ground is an irreversible act, a choice to permanently alter a page in the Earth's own archive. Modern archaeology has moved beyond the treasure hunt, embracing a core principle. Sometimes the most important discovery is knowing when to stop digging. This philosophy of minimal intervention is a pact with the future. It acknowledges that our current tools, as advanced as they seem, are primitive compared to what will be available in 50 or 100 years. By leaving significant, carefully chosen portions of a site completely untouched and intact, we are preserving a pristine library for future researchers who will have methods we cannot yet dream of, ways to extract information without ever moving a stone. It is an act of humility, recognizing that we are not the final chapter in the story of discovery, but merely one link in a long chain of inquiry. This ethical stance extends powerfully to the most sensitive spaces within a city, the resting places of its people and the sites it held sacred. The treatment of human remains is no longer a simple matter of scientific collection. It is a deeply respectful dialogue. In many cases, this involves direct consultation and collaboration with descendant communities, whether they are indigenous groups, local populations, or cultural heirs. These communities are not just stakeholders, they are partners who hold vital knowledge about the meaning of the place, guiding researchers on how to proceed with care, or even whether to proceed at all. A sacred spring that was the nucleation point for a city is not merely a hydrological feature, it is a living part of a cultural and spiritual landscape. To study it ethically means to understand its continuing significance. This collaborative model transforms the work from extraction to conversation. It ensures that the narrative we reconstruct includes not just the physical data, but the enduring meaning attached to it by those for whom the past is not distant history, but a living identity. The goal is a balanced legacy, where our maps and models of ancient urban expansion do not come at the cost of erasing the cultural continuity or violating the sanctity of the very places we seek to honor. In this light, every excavation decision becomes a question of stewardship, weighing the value of potential knowledge against the permanent change it brings. It is a slow, careful archaeology, one that measures progress not in cubic meters of earth moved, but in the depth of understanding gained and the integrity of heritage preserved for all who follow. The ultimate challenge is not just to list the phases, but to hear the story they tell. After the meticulous work of excavation, dating, and analysis comes the act of synthesis, the delicate art of weaving thousands of disconnected threads into a single, living tapestry. This is where the researcher becomes a storyteller, tasked with explaining not merely how the city expanded, but why its story unfolded in that particular rhythm. It means connecting a period of prolonged drought revealed in a lake core to the frantic construction of a new city reservoir seen in the archaeological layers. It links the sudden appearance of foreign pottery styles in a midden to the opening of a new trade route that brought both wealth and new social tensions. Synthesis transforms a sterile sequence of dates and soil layers into a narrative of human ambition, a chronicle of a community constantly negotiating with its environment, its neighbors, and its own growing complexity. A successful synthesis does more than inform, it resurrects. It allows us to perceive the ancient urban center not as a static ruin, but as a dynamic character in the grand drama of history. We begin to see its growth phases not as academic categories, but as chapters in a biography, each one revealing a profound truth about our species' relentless drive to build, to organize, and to find meaning in the shared spaces we create. The grid of Mohenjo-Daro becomes a testament to a society's deep belief in collective order. The relentless organic infill at Teotihuacan speaks of a vibrant populace insisting on personalizing a grand design. The imperial overhaul of Persepolis shouts a calculated message of absolute power to the world. When these threads are woven together, the city stops being a collection of stones and starts breathing again. We sense the collective anxiety that drove a community to raise a massive wall, the shared triumph that fueled a new temple's construction, and the quiet, daily resilience of families adapting their homes across generations. This narrative reminds us that every urban center, ancient or modern, is ultimately a story about people, about our shared capacity to imagine a common future and to shape the very earth beneath our feet in its pursuit. The final layer in any urban biography is the one we write ourselves, the meaning we choose to find in the silent stones. Our journey through these ancient streets reveals a fundamental truth. Cities are not built, they are grown, layer upon layer, decision upon decision, across centuries. They are not singular acts of creation but slow, collective works of art, shaped as much by the quiet choices of a potter as by the grand decrees of a king. From the sacred nucleus that first drew a community together, to the integrative leap that forged a shared identity, through the planned grid and the messy, vibrant infill of daily life, and finally to the imperial imprint that shouted power to the world, each phase is a chapter in a story of human response. It is a story of meeting challenges like feeding thousands or managing water, and seizing opportunities like new trade routes or moments of climatic abundance. Every wall raised and every neighborhood adapted is a fossilized moment of that endless conversation between ambition and reality, between order and life. Today, we combine the humble trowel with the eye of the satellite, the soil sample with the DNA sequencer, weaving together threads of evidence once thought lost. In doing so, we are piecing together the most ambitious biography of all, the biography of civilization itself. It is a story that displays, as the Roman architect Vitruvius once framed the ideals of architecture for meters, utilitas, and Venusta's strength, utility, and beauty, but forged not in a single moment of genius over the long, patient work of generations. These qualities emerge from the resilience of communities, the utility of shared solutions, and the beauty of a society finding its form. If this exploration of urban origins has captivated you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which ancient city's layered story fascinates you the most?